Hey, so how are you guys doing? It's kind of a big day because today marks my 50th game review. That's pretty cool, right? You stay the fuck out of this! Shit. Just keep it together. Keep it. I'm struggling. Detention is a side-scrolling psychological survival horror game from Taiwanese developer Red Candle Games, which is comprised of a skeleton crew of 8 people. It was released in January of 2017 after acquiring enough votes through Steam's Greenlight service, and would later make its way to PS4 and Nintendo Switch. It was released to pretty much unanimous praise and a number of awards, despite a select few finding the game to be more of a chore than the immersive and atmospheric experience the developers were hoping for. I can see how someone reading this book by its cover might end up not getting what they expected, because just looking at the moody, post-rock infused trailer and maybe a little gameplay, it most certainly looks like Detention is a Silent Hill clone, trussed up in an odd animation style and 2D perspective. If you're looking for a horror experience, you might be surprised, much like I get surprised every time I wake up in someone else's home. It's like, how did I wind up here? Where are the owners? Detention is set in 1960s Taiwan, and during a specific real-life span of Taiwan's history called the White Terror, a period of martial law which occurred from 1949 to 1987, where thousands of Taiwanese were imprisoned or executed in a decades-long witch hunt for anyone thought to oppose the Chinese Nationalist Party. People were deemed bandit spies for all manner of suspicious activity thought to express communist sympathies. So obviously a fun place to set a video game. We take control of Wei and Ray, 2 students at the remote Greenwood High School, cut off from society in a mountainous region. Wei is sleeping in class as his teacher, Miss Yin, is confronted by another teacher about a list. He wakes up to find his classroom empty and a typhoon warning written on the chalkboard. Confused, Wei tries to make his way out of the school, but it's night and everything is locked up. In his search for a way out, he comes across Ray, sleeping in a chair on a stage in the auditorium. Ray is similarly confused and does not remember how she came to be sitting there. The two make their way outside to the bridge leading to town, only to find it destroyed and a river of blood replacing it. Seeing no other option, they decide to camp out in their classroom for the night. At this point, I had ideas about where this game was going. It's been pretty straightforward so far. My expectations were pretty much out the window as soon as these two leave this room. We get a nice scene where we see these two sort of palling around before deciding to split up and find supplies. Wei heads out to see if he can contact anyone on the phone, but disappears as we sort of cross over to a more twisted and unsettling version of Greenwood. When we catch up with Ray, she is once again sleeping in the auditorium while Wei hangs from the ceiling by his feet unconscious. At this point, Ray becomes the focal character we follow as she navigates the increasingly bizarre and creepy high school, piecing together clues to her complicated and tragic past, all the while evading creatures ripped from Taiwanese folklore called Lingered. This story is utterly bathed in Taiwanese culture and history, and this was entirely the idea. Game designer Coffee Yao wished to will into existence, becoming disillusioned at the lack of representation in games. This is one of many things that go a long way in distinguishing Detention as a unique experience. Though it is easy to spot similarities to Silent Hill in the transitions to other worlds, the strange dreamlike logic the characters use in progressing. That's just a noise that happens. Every once in a while that noise happens. I don't know what to do. Now there's a dog barking. Hey! I think Detention strives to be something else though. I'm sure you could tell by looking at it, but Detention is not a good time. I mean, you might have a good time playing it, but there is no light here. This is a relentlessly dour and tragic story that takes place during an awful, cruel time in Taiwan's history, and following a character who makes some appalling decisions and is suffering the consequences. We are sort of dragged along while Ray comes to terms with that. Hello, Massive Dynamic. Is someone there?
What? Oh shit, I'm sorry, I think I dick dialed you.
What? Who is this?
It's me.
Who are you?
I think you know.
No, I don't. This shit doesn't have caller ID.
It doesn't?
No, look, I'm going for an aesthetic thing.
By having a landline?
Yeah. What?
I guess it's an aesthetic of poverty.
Look, are you gonna tell me who you are?
Oh, I'm you.
You are me. I am talking to me right now?
Yeah.
Okay, how is that happening? I mean, I'm right here, and I'm not somewhere else calling me.
I don't know, but I just wanted to help you learn something about yourself.
Oh, okay, what is it?
Well, I can't just tell you. I mean, like, I want to make a thing out of it, so I'm just gonna give you a clue.
Alright, what's the clue?
The burns hold the truth.
Oh, that is cryptic.
I know, right?
Okay, well, I'll see what I can do with that.
Cool.
You know, I'm kind of nice to me. Hello?
You think you can fucking talk to me like that, you piece
Oh,
of
okay. I guess that is more like it. So, I'd give the disclaimer that this does satisfy the base requirements for a spooky horror game. You might get spooked by this, I mean, I certainly was. There's ghosts and monsters and a generally unpredictable and eerie environment, but there does seem to be a noticeable shift in tone around the halfway point. Ray's story becomes much less about survival and more about these interesting tableaus we work through in order to fully understand Ray and what ultimately brought her. Did I say ultimately already? I'm sorry if I did. I'm a fucking idiot. I'm a dummy. I'm a shit. In order to fully understand Ray and what ultimately brought her to this strange, introspective purgatory of sorts. There is a lot of care and detail put into the impression we get of Ray's life, dealing with an oppressive government, a deteriorating family, and the feelings she harbors for someone at Greenwood. So once we have a better picture of why these creatures and threats are here, they sort of drop to the wayside as we devote all our attention to the tragic slice of life this game really is. I'll be honest, it's a tough sell. If you are the type to be moved emotionally or psychologically by an adventure type game, then this might be a memorable experience. On the other hand, if you're more interested in the survival horror aspect of it, I can foresee you being left wanting, just like my friends in the shipping container. I keep tightening those restraints, but gosh darn it, those little dickens keep chewing right through it. Much like Detention's plot, its gameplay mechanics are sort of ditched in the last leg of the game. What stays a constant is the point-and-click style problem solving you'll use to make your way through Greenwood. The items you collect are sometimes worked into the surreal logic of this world, meaning certain items will appear in a figurative sense instead of a literal one. At one point, an incriminating document that would lead to people being harmed appears not as a piece of paper but as a pistol. Speaking of paper, look, I'm not proud of that transition, but I'm committing to it. Ray carries around her school notebook to collect little notes and periodicals or clues you uncover. This proves to be very helpful in solving puzzles. They are mostly pretty self-explanatory, but some would call for you to take note of things you encounter earlier, and it mercifully does that for you. The survival aspect of Detention concerns how you evade the different monsters you'll come across, which, although nerve-wracking at first, aren't a threat for most of the game. There's pretty much two types of creatures. The first is your basic schoolgirl ghost that you need to hold your breath while you pass. The difficulty and tension arises from the timing of when you begin to hold your breath, because as I've learned many times, people need air to live. That's why I drilled little holes in that shipping container. So you have to get close enough to these gross, scary girls in order to hold your breath while you slowly shuffle past them. If you don't make it, Ray takes a deep breath that alerts them to you, and you will probably die unless you can make it through a door. The other type is a lantern spirit that you'll encounter every now and then that is super tall and carries a lantern. For these guys, you have to face away from them and hold your breath until they pass you. So the same principle applies. You have to know when to stop breathing so that you have time for him to loom over you and do his ghost shit before he moves on. There is also a third creature that's some kind of ball of hands that really all you have to do is run when you see it. The later half of the game becomes much more linear, and you'll do less backtracking and walking around, checking a bunch of doors only to find them stuck or jammed. I hate not being able to go where I please. One day, I will get back in there. You can't stop me, Chad. Oh, you know, it was a pleasant surprise to see good old-fashioned save points also. I feel like they are sort of passé in modern games, but it felt right in this one and added stakes to encounters with the lingered. I feel like this game is actively working to keep you unsure of what's ahead. Every time I would encounter a new area, I would just mutter to the game designers, all right, what are you about to pull? What's your fucking game, coffee? I enjoyed playing it. I enjoyed the point-and-click aspects of it and the simple but meaningful puzzles. They come up with a lot of creative ways to present Ray's story, like one sequence where you need to scan back and forth through an old radio to different stations, and every time you do, you appear at a different time in her life. I admit that the whole evading monsters thing just sort of randomly stops for some reason, and that's sort of puzzling, but it didn't stop me from enjoying my playthrough. It was just odd. Was it like making some kind of statement that the real horror of this girl's life is worse than any mythological haunt we could throw at her? Or did they just get tired of programming them to show up in different places? Come to think of it, there was a mechanic they introduced early on that I swear you only use once, where you leave like a bowl of rice as an offering for the lingered so it will be occupied while you slip past them. I wonder why none of this carried through to the end. I don't know. What am I gonna do, figure it out? I'm just some fucking guy. Some guy who can't even figure out this riddle. Wait a second. Burns. Yeah. Let's see what we got here. I think I gotta start taking those pills again. This is where Detention really shines. This game is oozing, positively exuding. It is discharging unique visuals and sound. It's a mixture of hand-drawn characters and backgrounds, comprised of photographs and graphics, all with a thick layer of film grain and grime that makes the world of Detention constantly tense and unsettling. Everything is animated really fluidly, which sometimes makes everyone look like marionettes, which is oddly appropriate as they show up several times throughout. There's just a really pleasant amount of life and movement in every frame, which is surprising for a game that has such a cut and pasted style to it. It's kind of like if you could walk through that journal in the opening credits of Seven. and maybe it's the lack of representation in horror games, but I found the addition of this being set in 1960s Taiwan really refreshing. It doesn't squander that setting, it takes full advantage of it and builds a really oppressive, tense atmosphere. Have I said tense enough? I don't think so. I'm gonna add a couple more in there. With no small help from the fantastic there's that sound again. Fucking my day up. From the fantastic sound design and music. There is so much attention paid to little sound cues in the environment that create these memorable, creepy moments that resonate with me a great deal. From a rope hitting a flagpole in the wind to the sounds of muffled conversations and laughter behind locked doors, all of it sounds so unique and otherworldly, especially with the dense, droning room tone tracks that are used throughout. It makes me want to leave a room as soon as possible, only to feel the same way about the next room I enter. The music is a mix of ambient tracks and these really great sort of post-rock tracks, infused with Eastern folk instruments. The soundtrack clearly has parallels to Akira Yamaoka's work in the Silent Hill games, as they both make use of these distorted industrial mechanical sounds to create a tense driving rhythm, as well as the little flourishes of trip-hop beats. Though cut from the same cloth, this soundtrack is so organically tailored to this game. Its Eastern influences shine and add a distinctiveness to it that is just right for it. And honestly, I don't mind any similarities to Silent Hill because it's not like Konami is jumping at making another one. So, someone's gotta pick up the baton, or rusty pipe if you will. I've got nothing bad to say about the way this game looks or sounds. I thought it was great. But if you're looking at it and thinking, hey, that doesn't look great, I disagree. Then, it looks like this the whole way through, so you probably won't have a change of heart midway. Yes?
Did you get that note?
Yeah, I got it. Is this like another clue?
Another... yeah.
So, what does this mean?
Just keep pulling at that thread, buddy.
Detention is a highly original, powerful, and tragic story that calls upon an untapped vein of horror. It makes use of some commonplace game mechanics to distract you, while it weaves this devastating narrative that is suffocating in its bleakness. Synonyms. This is not to say that there isn't plenty of beauty to be found here. Fantastically weird backgrounds and visions accompanied by moody atmospheric music. It's great. If this is the sort of thing you'd find beauty in, it's great. I'll admit I'm biased towards things that are depressing and introspective. It was also nice getting a glimpse of Taiwanese folklore and learning about a moment in history I admittedly knew very little about. Trailers and promos for this game give the impression that the survival horror aspects take precedent, and for better or worse, they do not. What remains constant is an enjoyable, if slightly easy, point-and-click experience, with some interesting survival horror ideas, similar to Clock Tower, that are all but abandoned pretty early on. It's also, as a whole, not an incredibly long game. It took me maybe 5 or 6 hours to play and replay the final chapter to get the second ending. There's 2 endings. The second one that I had to go back and get was billed as the good ending. But in truth, I think that would be more accurate to call it the complete ending. I can't make this more clear. There ain't a lot of good going on in this game, but that's fine by me. Tragedy is all I know, so it's kind of comforting. Yeah, I have been racking my brain, and I cannot for the life of me figure out what I meant by this. Hello?
You still looking at it?
Yeah, dude, I think I'm gonna need another clue.
Sure thing, buddy. Have you tried turning the paper over yet?
You mean...
No, like the other side, fuckface.
Oh yeah, it says the same thing. What does this mean? Hello? Hello? That's the end of the video. I'm sorry if I sound weird. I broke a couple teeth. Don't worry, it's not the ones that are important to society, the ones in the front. It was the ones in the back. The ones that are way more inconvenient and difficult, and it's okay. I'm just gonna, spend all my money fixing them. Anyway, thank you for watching my video. Make sure to like and subscribe and comment and do things that will make me feel better. Not only about the teeth, but about life in general. Since this seems to be a common question with this new flood of subscribers I have, I do make all the music featured here myself. If you, for some goddamn reason, want to hear it, I put the ones I'm least embarrassed of on my SoundCloud, which will be, I think, soundcloud.com/thousandface. I think that's what brings. I'll put a link. Here's a link. Can I put links? If I can't put a link, just try that URL. I'll put it in the description. I'll put it in the description. Ha! What else? Oh yeah, if you want to hear anything else I do a podcast about Disney stuff every Friday. Mostly. It's been a little difficult with the accident to my mouth, but for the most part I do it every Friday with another person named Paige. It's a very cute, adorable podcast about weird Disney stuff, and you can listen to that on YouTube, SoundCloud, Google Play, iTunes. If you're interested in any of that, listen to that, like it, subscribe to that. Oh, also support me on Patreon, because I'm gonna need it. Supporting me on Patreon supports both my channels. It's the same shit. If you are already a patron, thank you so much. I am indebted to you a great deal. All right, I'm gonna go take more drugs. See you later. Which one of these makes it stop?